All right. Chapter 58, The Wild Robot Escapes the Cabin. Yeah. The hailstorm... Ooh, there's my finger. Sorry. The hailstorm was brief, but violent. Its icy stones were quickly melting away, but the damage would linger on. The valley was littered with shredded leaves and wildflowers. Wounded animals were hobbling back to their homes. Several unlucky birds lay limp in the grass. Inside the cabin, Roz was standing by the window. She held Bright Bill in her arms, his bruised body wrapped in an old blanket. The robot knew everything there was to know about caring for animals, but all her son needed was time. His injuries would heal on their own. "Go on without me, Ma," said the goose in a weak voice. "I'll catch up to you when I'm feeling better." "That is ridiculous," said the robot. "What kind of mother would I be? Or what kind of mother would leave her injured son behind?" "But, Ma..." "Stop talking," interrupted Roz. "You need to rest." Bright Bill tried to argue, but he was already falling asleep. The cabin was simple. Just a square room with a wood stove, 2 chairs beside a table, and a couple of cots rotting in the corner. Dusty mugs and bowls sat on a shelf. Otherwise, the walls were bare. It was clear no humans had been there for a very long time. However, it seemed that some other creature had moved in. The whole place had a foul odor. Lumps of feces were strewn about, and little footprints trailed away from a dark hole in the floor. Everybody knows what feces means, right? Means poop. Roz leaned over the hole, and in the language of the animals, she said, "Hello, is anyone down there?" Something moved, and then a pair of shining eyes looked up from the darkness. "Who are you?" said a voice. "I didn't invite you into my home." Wonder who it is. In a classroom setting, I would ask, does anyone have a guess? Personally, I'm guessing a raccoon. Yeah, that's my guess. But we'll see. "I am sorry to intrude," said the robot. "My son and I were only trying to escape the hailstorm." "Your son?" said the voice. "Is that him in your arms? Let me see." Very gently, the robot lifted a fold of cloth and revealed the sleeping goose. "He must take after his father," said the voice. That's kind of a joke. That's funny. "He is my adopted son," the robot explained. "My name is Roz, and this is Bright Bill." The shining eyes blinked, and the voice squeaked with excitement. "You're Roz and Bright Bill? The birds have been singing about you for months. You're living legends." "Technically, I am not living," said the robot. "You seem pretty alive to me," said the voice. "Either way, it's nice to meet you. They call me Sprinkles." With that, the creature crawled up through the hole in the floor. She was covered in black fur from her nose all the way to the tip of her fluffy tail. Well, except for those white stripes running down her back. Oh my. You see, Sprinkles was a skunk. The robot took one look at her and stepped backward. Sprinkles frowned. "You know, Roz, skunks only get stinky when we're nervous." "Are you nervous now?" "Well, sort of, but in a good way. I'm honored to meet you. Please pull up a seat and tell me what brings you here." Sprinkles hopped onto the table and listened as Roz described their journey. The skunk was a very good listener. While Roz spoke, Sprinkles nodded politely and said things like, "Oh my," and "Is that right?" and "You don't say." This went on until Bright Bill began to stir. "Ma, I'm thirsty," he whispered. "There's a creek right out back," said Sprinkles, "and those might be useful." She motioned to the bowls on the shelf. "Please help yourself to anything. My home is your home." It turns out skunks can be quite hospitable. Sprinkles invited the visitors to stay as long as they liked, so our friends spent Bright Bill's recovery in the cabin. The goose mostly slept. The robot brought him water and food. The skunk made sure they were both comfortable. A few mornings later, sunlight streamed in through the window and onto Brightbill. He was squawking and waddling and fluttering through the cabin. His injuries had healed, and he was eager to continue their journey. Thank you for everything, Sprinkles, the robot waved as she marched away from the cabin with her son on her shoulder. Glad I could help, called the skunk. Misunderstood creatures like us gotta look out for each other. Oh, Sprinkles the skunk. Nice character. The strange wilderness. Oh, this picture is intriguing. I wonder what this thing here is on this building. And this here? It's like maybe something to do with lumber or mining? I don't know. Another gloomy day had settled over the mountains. Here and there, the sun broke through the clouds and bright streaks came shining down like spotlights. One of those bright streaks swept over a rugged mountainside and found our friends. For a moment, the robot and the goose basked in warm sunlight. Then the patch of light moved on and rolled into the next valley, where it sparkled across a strange industrial site. A patchwork of large, boxy structures was nestled among the trees. Broken walkways clung to the walls. Ramps and pipes slanted up from holes in the ground. The robot's computer brain identified the site. It was a deserted coal mine. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense in this picture. This was a strange kind of wilderness. Scattered throughout that mountain range were ghosts of human activity. Overgrown railways, rusted automobiles. Oh, look. Chit-Chat. It's right there. You see Chit-Chat? Hey, Chit-Chat. What's happening? Yeah? Not much to say today, huh? Hello. Chit-Chat. All right. Well, we'll see you later. Have a good day. Bye. All right. Okay. Chit-Chat's not talking today. I guess we haven't seen Chit-Chat in this book. That was in the first book. But hopefully they see Chit-Chat if they make it back to the island. Okay. Ghost of human activity, overgrown railways, rusted automobiles, spindly towers perched on mountain tops, faded signs with messages like no trespassing and no hunting. It seemed humans had once lived and worked in this wilderness, only to leave it all behind. In places, though, there was still activity. Robot activity. Armies of robot workers methodically dug new tunnels and built new dams and worked in new mining operations. They took down abandoned buildings and hauled away truckloads of litter. Our friends were curious about these working robots, but they kept a safe distance and went on their way. Chapter 60, The Hunters. Crack! A gunshot echoed through the mountains. There weren't many hunters willing to trek into that wilderness, but those who did were serious. They camped out, wore camouflage, and fired traditional rifles for the sport of it. Crack! Roz and Brightbill were desperate to stay clear of the hunters. However, that was proving difficult. The trees were tightly packed together and the undergrowth was tough and tangled, so they followed the deer paths that cut through this part of the forest. But they never knew when or where the next shot would be fired. Crack! The gunshots were growing louder. Our friends slowed to a crawl, afraid of being seen or heard, and then the chatter of forest animals fell silent. Crack! A bullet whizzed through the undergrowth, and a deer went bounding away. At the same time, birds screeched and flapped into the air. Unfortunately, one of those birds was Brightbill. Scared and confused, the young goose fluttered up to a tree limb just as two hunters emerged from the bushes. "What's a goose doing alone in these mountains?" said Hank, staring up at Brightbill. "And what's it doing in a tree?" I was thinking about that the other day. A goose, I've never seen a goose in a tree. I don't even know that they can perch on a tree limb with the way their feet are. 'Cause they've got kind of webbed feet. So I don't even know if it's like scientifically possible. Because I see geese all the time in the air and around the field, and they land in water or they'll land on land, but I've never seen one in a tree. Anyway, there must be something wrong with it, said Miguel. Maybe you should put it out of its misery. Hank reloaded his rifle. We're here to hunt deer, he said, but it looks like we're having goose for dinner. Had the hunters known Bright Bill the way we do, reader, I'm sure they would have left him alone. But they knew nothing about him. To them, Bright Bill was just another goose, a meal, and they were getting hungry. The hunter raised his rifle. He took a deep breath. His finger reached for the trigger, and then a fierce gust of wind suddenly blew across the forest floor. No, not wind, footsteps. Something was stomping toward the hunters. Their rifles were ripped away, bent into hooks, and thrown aside. The men had hunted all manner of beasts, but they'd never come across this. Well, they didn't know what this thing was. It looked like a tree stump standing on two long roots with branches hanging from its sides. The men stumbled backward, eyes and mouths opened wide. Then they turned and ran, and their terrified noises trailed off through the leaf litter. The goose was terrified too. He slumped off his branch and into his mother's arms. The poor bird was trembling with fear, but he was unharmed. I am so sorry, Bright Bill, said the robot. I should have acted sooner. You are safe now, I promise. Whew, that was intense. All right, until tomorrow, the guide.